Hey guys, it's Elena. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be walking you through how I made this beautiful Liberty London fabric quilt. I am obsessed with how this came out. I saw Joann's had all of their Liberty London fabrics 25% off, and I knew it was time to pounce on making a quilt. I've been dying to make a quilt with this fabric, so cannot wait to show you, and hopefully I inspire you to make your own ombre floral cute quilt. So this is all of the fabric that I got from Joann's. I am obsessed with this fabric. I've been seeing the Liberty London fabric at my Joann's for a while, so when I saw it was 25% off, I pounced. So I got 9 1/4 yard fabric pieces for my front, which is all those at the bottom of this picture, and then I got 1/2 yard for the backing, which is the yellow, and then 1/3 yard for the binding. I cut out 4-inch squares, so it's basically a 15 square by 15 square quilt, which comes out to just under 4.5 feet finished. So I am basically taking my fabric, folding it, so I'm making 4-inch wide long strips. So I'm doing it in the strips so that I can, I guess, just go a bit faster with the cutting process. So once I finished cutting all of my front pieces, I decided to make this quilt go just a tiny bit faster and sew some of the strips together. So I kind of laid out the different ordering that I wanted. I wanted this to be kind of an ombre look, so I decided to put together basically pieces of 2. So I'm taking my big long blue strip and putting it together with this kind of pinky blue strip of fabric and sewing it together right sides together. And here it is. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking those strips that I have, so it's basically 2 long 4-inch wide strips, and then I'm cutting those into 4-inch pieces. So I basically have lots of pairs of 2 squares. This basically just reduced the amount of sewing time that I had, and you can always keep going and make bigger pairs. So instead of having, 2 squares in each set, you could do 4 or 8, whatever. You can make it huge, but because I wanted to pick and really lay out and decide how I wanted this, I wanted the pairs to be a bit smaller. So this created more work for me later on because I had a lot of small pieces to sew together, but it made it so that I had a lot of flexibility when it came to laying out my pieces because I just basically had pairs to work with. So I made sure to put the darkest fabric with the next color of fabric, and I just kept doing that. So with my light fabrics, I kept it with light fabrics. With the darker red fabrics, I kept it with the pinks, and with the darker blues, I kept it with the other blues. So here, I'm just really taking my time, laying everything out, and really trying to make this ombre look, and I do really feel like it looked nice, but do make sure that you take your time, really look at how everything is laying, and make sure that you like how it looks from a distance. And you can see I'm counting that there are 15 squares wide and it is 15 squares long. This is how I ended up having it look in the end. I did have a couple extra squares left over, so I had a bit of wiggle room, but I do really like how this looked. And then this is kind of just a bit of a close-up prior to sewing all these little square pairs together. So here I am, I'm basically grabbing 2 pairs next to each other, one at a time. So I'm grabbing these 2, I'm taking it over to my sewing machine, I usually sew upstairs, but in this case, I took it downstairs, and I first nested that seam and then did my 1/4 inch seam allowance and sewed along. So here you are, I've got my perfect nested seams, and you're basically just going to repeat this process until all of your squares are together. So you're going to put the little 2 pairs together to make a set of 4, and then you're going to put 2 sets of 4 together to make a set of 8, and you're just going to keep doing that. The next step after you have completed your quilt top is to press your quilt back. That's just going to help everything lay a lot better and help the quilting later on. I learned press it, don't iron it. So just lift and press, lift and press. So I decided to spray baste this quilt. I've never done that before, but I tend to have a problem with there being puckering. So I bought this spray basting from Joann's. I taped down the backing of my quilt and then sprayed the backing to the batting, and then did the same thing with the top of the quilt. Go really slow, and obviously wear a mask if you can. You want to be careful because you don't want to inhale any of this. So I'm just making sure that there's no puckering on the back. I did add a few safety pins just to make sure that this all stayed together. I'm picking all of the spray glue off of my fingers because I did get some. Again, I had never used this spray basting before, so I wasn't sure how it would hold up. So I did add a few safety pins just for good measure. So I decided I wanted to quilt diagonals, and I started using a water-soluble pen and then realized it didn't show up very well on my quilt. So I just decided to do this and pretty much just eye it as I went along. So basically, because my squares are pretty small, it wasn't that big of a deal, and I found that it was pretty accurate. So I would just basically stop at a corner and then just go corner to corner, get to that corner, stop, and then just keep going. And I did that both diagonals. So now I am cutting out the fabric that I'm going to be using for my binding. So I am making my binding, and I am cutting out a 26-inch square and then basically putting these triangles together to make a big diamond shape. There are tutorials on how to make this if you want a bit more in-depth tutorial, but I'm basically making the square, turning it into 2 triangles, sewing the 2 triangles together so that I have a big diamond trapezoid shape. And then I am going to be measuring up how big I want my bias tape. So I'm measuring up about 2.5 inches from the bottom and marking with a marker and using my ruler to make sure it is straight. And then I am doing that all the way up the fabric and then lining up the corners. And I'm basically, as you can see, I have one whole 2.5 inch wide strip overlap. As you can see, the bottom is overlapping, but I'm lining up those other lines, and then I sewed along the raw edge. So I'm basically going to cut all the way around that marker, and it's going to make one big long strip of bias tape. So next I'm just cutting off all of the excess trim that I have, and I'm cutting off the corners and making it rounded. I'm just using a paper plate to do that. And then I'm gonna actually attach my binding. So I love that I don't have to do mitered corners because I cut off the corners and rounded them. Seriously, rounding your corners is so underrated. It's like my favorite thing to do ever. I made this binding in bias tape form, so I'm sewing in the crease and then folding it up. So there it is from the front and the back. It looks really nice. When you go to finish it and sew it together, just make sure you fold in at the beginning of where you started your binding. And then I'm just folding it over and keeping it folded over with some clips so that I can machine stitch this on the other end. So I'm just doing a very, very small seam allowance, and there you can see it from the front and the back. If you don't like to machine stitch, that is okay, but here it is. I am obsessed with how this turned out. I even made a little tag with my sewing machine with my name on it. Oh my gosh, so cute. I love the contrast of all of the fabrics. I think it just works together really well, and I'm obsessed with the curved edges. Man, I really like how this turned out. I hope this inspires you to make your very own quilt, and man, if you can snag some of this Liberty London fabric on sale, definitely get some. It is beautiful. It feels so silky, and I really am impressed with how this came out. I hope you loved this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one.